Yeah, I'm just going to try to share the screen right now. And actually, this connects really nicely to what Dr. Lau was just talking about in terms of the way we work with students. So hopefully you can see what I've got shared up here, and I'll just expand it to full screen. And in the meeting chat, I'll share a link as well to where you can find all of this.
We can do that on
So
your behalf, Sam, if you like.
great. So yeah, this is a model that I designed a while ago back in December, as we were thinking about what's going to happen in schools, in teaching and learning when these AI tools start to come through. So at our school, we were researching ideas around AI in education for a while before. And then, some AI-based writers had started to come through, various image generation tools had started to appear. And then it just all went wild after ChatGPT was produced. And so in this presentation, the link will be shared for you. But basically anything in the slides that has shadows around it are resources that you can click on and have a play with. And I'll give an overview of what we're aiming for with this. So I'm the Director of Innovation in Learning and Teaching at the Western Academy of Beijing. I'm also an EdD student at the University of Bath, looking at some of this work as well. And a lot of the work that we think about when we're talking about AI in schools to us is thinking about how we might frame these conversations with colleagues and teachers. And so working through the ideas around how we might be able to adapt learning cultures to this, I came up with this kind of acronym, but really it was breaking down ideas around how to consider the holistic idea of AI in education and more specifically, really generative AI. So things like ChatGPT and so on. And so what I'll do is I'll unpack some of these concepts. And they're quite useful in a way. You can take it, adapt it, or ignore it if you want to. But they're kind of thinking points or talking points about how this might work. And we know that in school cultures where there's a lot of interactive learning and there's a lot of approaches to learning where there's interaction between the teachers and students, and the student's voice and you know what they're doing, and you design learning that's kind of authentic and inspiring, it's probably going to be less of an issue. But if you're in a situation perhaps where you've got hundreds of students or it's very standardized types of assessments, it'll probably continue to be quite a challenge. A lot of this work comes through, we're an international baccalaureate school, and we're kind of an innovative school too. We like to try lots of new things. But I've got a past too of working as a coach with Project Zero for creating cultures of thinking online. And the more we were seeing these tools arise, it was really more of a culture question than a technology question. And so, I'm always been inspired and informed by the work of Ron Richart and Mark Church and the Creating Cultures of Thinking work from Harvard Project Zero. And I think that's what really lies at the heart of a lot of this to me. How are we leveraging these forces in our schools to empower really good learning? And who is doing the thinking in this moment? And what is the teacher doing? But also alongside that, then moving into the AI space, are we being safe and ethical in the use of these tools? And how are students actually showing their learning along the way? So not having that invisible gap between setting the assignment and getting the final product, but how do we see how the learning progresses and how do we model that? So in the model of if you use me AI, what we were thinking of here is how might we first start to understand the technology? And so connected to the resources with this, there's a LibGuide, and it started last year, but really focused at the beginning on students who were thinking about AI and how might they learn more about AI, how might they learn about the different types of technologies and things that exist, how might they be able to try things out, find out more. And we know that these tools are already here. They're not going to go away, and they're only going to get more powerful. So a big challenge with this is they start to become used more and more widely. But do the students that we have, and even the adults that we work with, really understand what they're doing and what underlies those tools? So part of it, the you in the model is really thinking about how do we understand it, and how might we approach it. So my approach has been, and our approach has been, trying to curate as much useful resources as possible. The pace is going way too fast for regular teachers to be able to have the time to keep up with this. So the power of curation, working with your ed tech teams or your library teams, is a big benefit too. Although one thing that I worry about quite a bit too now is I think we're on the tipping point of all of these AI tools becoming invisible. And the active choice of 6 months ago to go and find an AI tool to help us with a problem is becoming diminished in that all the core tools are starting to build generative AI assistants into them. And so there's a link to a post here from last week or a couple of weeks ago. Whereas what might that do to this opportunity to be mindful in understanding what's happening? Moving on to the kind of S part of the model, it's taking that approach that this tool isn't here to replace the teacher, it's to augment it. So how might the tools that we're able to put into teachers' hands and in students' hands kind of give them more opportunities for inquiry or practice or mastery or deep learning? Or how can we find the value add with teachers in terms of automating administrivia or taking away the things that they spend a lot of time doing in service of their students that they might be able to do more efficiently now and therefore spend more time in the interactive space with their kids. And so that's an approach too, right? And I'm very fortunate in the environment we're in, where people are looking at this as an opportunity more than a threat most of the time. But finding the early adopters, finding people who want to try something out, or teams who are ready to see how it might help them with their subject or with their unit of inquiry or with their approach. And a really powerful thing to do with them too is to kind of demonstrate uses that are really valuable, not novelty. Back in the early days, early days being 6 months ago, people might have done kind of gimmicky kind of approaches to using some of the generative AI. But there are loads of prompts and examples and tools and use cases out there now where, with simple approaches, teachers can find something to really help them really quickly. And we found that it opens the door to more kind of nuanced conversation about how we might use this in our schools. And then there's such an amazing community online, including lots of people who've been in these webinars, who are sharing really openly what they're learning. And I find it really inspiring, and Twitter's full of it too, and so's LinkedIn. So that's kind of the idea of supplementing and supporting the learning. Some of the things that we've already made these tools do for us is thinking about making accessible information ready for all of our students, rewriting things at different levels or being able to create resources that are tailored to specific interests or specific lines of inquiry. Something that took my interest really early on was thinking about how we can use them for inclusion and supporting multilingual learners. So we have, 50 plus nationalities in our school. And so a teacher might be working on a specialist subject with, 5, 6, 7, 10 languages in the class. And, in the past, teachers might have spent a long time translating vocab lists or, not necessarily understanding the translanguaging approach that students might be taking as they think in their own language, but they output in English. And then other ways, there's even ways to help give feedback, against rubrics on draft work to support the learning as it goes on. Implicit in lots of these, or built in actually, in lots of these tools are biases as well. And there's dangers in AI too. And so becoming aware and making visible some of these helps us to force it to become less, to consider different perspectives or divergent perspectives, or to act like a thinker who's not represented in the room. So there's lots of ways that you can get kind of easy access to demonstrations of value quite early on. Another really powerful thing too is the expectations that we have for learning, and this is directly from Cultures of Thinking as an idea. So valuing thinking, learning, and integrity more than trying to catch kids out or trying to catch learners out is a powerful move too, right? I've put in the bottom of the slide here the statement from the International Baccalaureate Organization about what academic integrity really is. And the sentence that we lean on a lot is this idea that it's acting in the responsible way so that others can trust us. And so being open, showing our working, using the tools responsibly, for good and for not harm, and keeping the communication as open as possible. So we're expecting for our learners that they will be learning a lot, and they might be augmenting the learning with some of these tools, but we also need to keep those conversations and expectations open. This is something that we've talked about a lot in, teaching and learning design, and it's avoiding that idea of the invisible middle. What's happening between the moment when we set an assignment and when we get the results, when we get the final product. And there's many, many opportunities along this. to avoid the invisibility in the middle, whether it's peer learning, like Dr. Lau just talked about, peer feedback, conferencing with the teachers, working together to solve problems, or coming up, or using the AI tools even to come up with different questions to explore or different resources to find out. And I think this is probably more important than AI itself. It's that whole culture around learning and how do we work with our learners together. So through that, then thinking about how we use it to model and motivate interactive learning. How does the teacher perhaps model ethical and productive use of the AI? How do they create that culture in their room where it's okay to try new things as long as you're open about what you're doing? Using it to iterate on design or feedback on the work, or even using it to show peers each other, this is how I use this tool, this is how I'm trying to find new information or synthesize my ideas. The resource on the left, there's an example of a booklet I put together for adapting Project Zero thinking routines to an AI-enhanced classroom. How might you include AI partners perhaps as peers within the learning process in different ways of thinking? And really we want to, in my school and in many others, I think, to encourage that innovation and not fear, and to support teachers and curate the resources for them as we go, so that when they're ready, they can try something out. And not everybody's ready right away. I think a lot of, we've been in China, and we haven't left for a long time. And this came hot on the heels of COVID, right? And everybody's at a very different state of readiness. But as we head in towards a break now, is that there is a moment to reflect and to think about how we might adapt these tools for ourselves and our learners next year. When we think too about the modeling of the interactions with students, I've put a question set together here too, in case somebody wants to use them as they're talking to kids, as they're using AI tools. Do they understand it? Is it supplementing their learning? Do they know what the expectations are for powerful learning in their school, but also for academic integrity and safety and ethics in the use of AI? So that brings me into the ethical implications, and it's the other E in the model. I think to me it's the most important one. And I've put together a whole page there of lots of different ethical discussions and resources and ideas, as well as frameworks from different organizations around ethics of AI in education globally. And what are the conversations we need to be having with our tech teams, our teachers, our kids, our parents, about what the tools are built with? How do they demonstrate bias, or how do we mitigate against the bias? What do we look for things that are safe? Are we promoting tools that are safe for kids to use? Earlier ChatGPT was rated as 18 plus or 13 with parent permission. So what we've done is find some other tools that actually are accessible and okay to use. But also thinking too about, environmental implications, the implications of labor and the way these tools have been trained. They're all really rich conversations to have about the technological future that our kids are growing into. So I would always advocate that people start to put these ethical conversations somewhere within their units, somewhere within their explorations of AI, to keep that forwards, especially as it starts to become more invisible. That button stops becoming called AI and it just says, how can I help you? Or even starts to fill things in for you now. And we need to take that moment to stop and think. The other side then is if we've got those elements of teaching and learning in place, then what about our learning design? So the resource that here on the side is one that we've been using a little bit with grade 8 students and above, but thinking about Perplexity, which is a really powerful tool for it's GPT plus search, and it's getting more powerful as it develops. It has a co-pilot built into it as well. And this is something that can even give a learning record as students build upon their inquiry, and it gives a link to what they've done that they might even be able to include in a research method section of their assignment. So, the applications of the tools can actually be quite authentic for the students. We've also seen students use them to take materials, think about them and work with them in their own language, and then think about how to work it back. So as they're using a translanguaging approach with the tools, they're still able to cognitively take on challenging work, but maybe it supports them in actually being able to better express their thinking in the target or the output language. So we're really thinking here about choosing and using tools that can make it easier to do better things, to not be so afraid of it, but also to be really honest along the way of what it's doing. On the left, there's a few tools that we use. Perplexity, I think, is probably the most powerful one that we're using at the moment. At the older end of our school, a lot of students are using Elicit, supported by their librarians, for finding academic research papers. And it's a really powerful tool that sits on top of Semantic Scholar. And it allows students to ask questions, find relevant papers and get little summaries, and then decide more quickly than if they're just randomly Googling or going through library resources, what it is they want to follow up on. So it's not writing the assignments for them, but it's really helping them ask better questions, craft better questions, and find better resources. Another really neat little tool called Diffit allows you to generate materials or adapt materials to different reading levels with different types of concept check questions and so on. So there's lots of things that are really powerful and already in people's hands. And I think for us, using those authentically and being open about it is helping to enhance that learning culture. And so then finally kind of moving into taking it into the space like here, you know, maybe
Stephen, I'm
building.
so sorry. We're gonna have to stop you. It's well, unless you can wrap up in about 30 minutes, 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, so we're done. And the last one here is the inspiring innovation that comes with it. So also showing students examples of AI being used for power or being used for good, with the global goals and different projects. So that's how we're approaching it, and maybe it's helpful to people. And there's lots of fantastic resources out there actually to support AI in education. And so, yeah, thanks for the opportunity for having us here. Yeah.